So I think the trick of business storytelling, or for that matter, any storytelling, is to get in and out of the story before people realize it's a story. Whatever you do is a result of so many people contributing together for your task. And then when you start looking at it, teamwork, people management, all of it completely takes a different dimension. In business storytelling, you're not telling a story to entertain people. In business storytelling, you're telling a story to make a point. But if a leader is not a good communicator, then boy, he would not have become a leader.
Hi, Uday. This is exciting to get you. A storyteller calls another storyteller. Oh my God, this is amazing. So, welcome to Second Act Podcast. How are you feeling?
Yeah, thank you so much, Archana. It's a pleasure to be on this. Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me and having me here.
Oh, great. So, Uday, what I hear and what you have described yourself to be, I want to really bring our audience to a little background about you. So, you are from Vizag, of course, grown up
Yes.
with these beautiful beaches and, very beautiful scenic atmosphere in nature, I would say so much. You call yourself a person from a very middle class background, of course, who has a similar kind of trajectory like mine in the corporate world for 20 plus years. And I want to know more about that as well, because so many people ask me, why now? Why, after giving most of your life to the corporate world, what happened? And then what made you a storyteller now? Because you are the co-founder of the social audio learning platform called Mentza. And that's where I actually saw your name and heard a little bit more about you to be intrigued to call you on Second Act Podcast. You are a storyteller, not only a storyteller, but a business storyteller, a leadership coach, as you say. So what happened in between to have this transition? Um, how was that corporate life linked to what you're doing right now? Is there a link at all? So please introduce yourself. And as you put people on the spot to say 1 minute time, all right, to just introduce yourself and to know more about Uday. So welcome to Second Act Podcast, Uday.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. Yeah, fantastic to be just talking to another storyteller as well. And this is just awesome. This whole concept of second act and the name is just fantastic, right? So congratulations on doing this. Yeah, so born brought up in Vizag, uh, and uh, and I do talk about the middle class values simply because my parents, what my father's been with the State Bank of India for all his life. Started off as a clerk and then moved up a large extended family. My mother finished her medicine and she was a surgeon. She was into her specialization working with children and women. And we've always had a small house with a lot of relatives, and we always used to sleep out on the verandas because there's always someone visiting us. There's always a marriage. There's always someone passing through Vizag. Vizag is a beautiful coastal town, great weather, beaches. We could just the beach was just very close by, so we could go. The school we got in, my parents ensured that we always got to the best of the school. So my dad keeps telling me the first time the school admission had to be sought, he had to actually stand in the queue when he was having 102 temperature all through the night to just get the admission. But my brothers had it easy because once the elder sibling was there, it was easier for them. So I grew up, all my schooling was in Timpani School. It's an ICSE school. It's a Christian missionary school of sorts, but slightly more, very, very secular for the times that we had lived in. So life is all about also reading the Lord's Prayer as well as celebrating all the Indian festivals. And then, as I finished my BSc and then I moved out of college, I got into TAPME. That's where I did my management in Manipal, and I got into my career with Eveready Industries. The first day, I caught a bag of batteries and torches, and I was sitting in front of this wholesaler trying to sell. That guy was abusing me and figuring out why I was not able to supply his stocks of batteries and torches. And it's a story that I keep sharing in most of my workshops because the kind of hustled me until by afternoon I could give him his batteries and torches, because the company I was working with, Eveready, was always rationed in terms of supplies. And so if you didn't give them the supply of batteries and torches, then that guy would not be able to sell whatever it was. And I remember getting the first treat of a awesome rasgulla, the sweetest rasgulla that I've ever tasted. And that kind of took me off 23 years in three different companies in various roles in sales, marketing, business, globally, within the country, handling large teams, brands. And after selling, and so I worked with Wipro after that for 11 years, Wipro Consumer Care, then with Samsung for about 10 to 11 years. And then after selling millions of batteries, mobile, soaps, talcum powders, I decided that I had enough of that and I wanted to step up. I was always fascinated with working on leadership and folks. And one day when the opportunity came in Samsung to set up something called the Samsung Sales and Marketing Academy, I did sit with it. And when I started doing a couple of workshops, I realized that the only way I was making sense with people was when I was able to share experiences in a format in which it was a story. And it kind of dawned on me that storytelling is perhaps stories are the only sense making tools that humans have. So I put some efforts in trying to understand the whole how does one apply the whole aspect of stories into business conversations. Did some work with learned it from Sean Callahan of the Anecdote and Anecdotally Yours based in Australia. Did a lot of work on my own, and then when the time came, I set up something called the 1 Minute Stories, which is again something that I started on LinkedIn. I used to write about 200 word stories on LinkedIn, which used to take about a minute. So I kind of said everyone is hashtagging it. So let me also hashtag it and call hashtag 1 Minute Stories. So what became a series of story posts on LinkedIn eventually became a newsletter, eventually becomes the name of the company that a consulting firm where I do a lot of work with business storytelling for leaders, getting them to tell their stories better, right? Especially in the area of communication and leadership. And then Menza happened. Menza happened with a bunch of my friends. I'm one of the founding partners where so the best, and we will discuss about Menza, but Menza is actually a live social audio platform. We said that there is very little space for meaningful conversations on aspects that people really want to be curious and learn about. And so we said Menza could be the space where people can come and have engaging conversations on aspects that they want to learn and are curious about. And that's what Menza is, about 20-minute learning conversations. It's been 2 years. So it's a bit of a nutshell. I know I crossed the 2 minutes thing, but
No, that's fine. It's your whole life that you have to put it, in a very compressed manner. So you did a good job. Okay, so very interesting. So because you started with something called Tell Your Story in 1 Minute. Of course, when I started my journey with Discover Your Second Act, every time, I was doing something, putting a program together or going out to a corporate or even reaching out to just doing something on a B2C space. Everything just came out to be what's the objective and what's the outcome. And this is what I've learned, along the way, that without an objective and an outcome, there is no story. So what are the things that you keep in mind or you tell the leaders of today to keep in mind when they have to do a 1 minute storytelling? What are the key components that you talk about?
a beautiful question, right? I think the 1 minute story is more of a metaphor for having stories in the business context, being crisp and concise, and uh, and weaving them into your conversations, right? As much as storytelling is a very, very powerful way of communicating with your audience, it is a communication strategy that one needs to choose because it's a very powerful way in which we can connect with people. You can't get into a business conversation where, let's say, there's a boardroom and say, once upon a time, there's a big lion. You can't do that, right? You can't do such things. You'll get kicked out. So as much as so Sean Callahan in his book called Putting Stories to Work talks about the big S storytelling and the small S storytelling, right? And that's something that I learned, that the big S storytelling is reserved for those big, huge banners called Pixar, the Disneys, the Star Wars, and the Bahubalis of the world, where or the RRR now, the current flame, where you actually talk about big gigantic sets and there's music, there's background, a whole lot of uh, fantastic storytelling. But when it comes to the other side, what is the small S storytelling is what is typically all about anecdotes, examples, experiences, recounts, and stuff that you can actually talk about to make a point, right? And which is why typically in most business conversations, storytelling, business storytelling is about this aspect of how you are able to weave in an experience, bring in your own personal experience or something that you've heard in a story. And which is why I keep telling the leaders, getting back to your question, that in business storytelling, you're not telling a story to entertain people. In business storytelling, you're telling a story to make a point. And that is
Right.
why most of the workshops that I do, I call them story your point, because the objective of what you want to make has to be very clearly be clear first in your mind. Then you have to tell it out. First, tell why you're telling a story, then tell the story, and then reinforce why you told that story. That is when a story gets a meaning in the context, right? Or different people have different words for it. I call them as relevant statements. Some people say you have to set the context for it very clearly. Some people say you have to set the objective, but effectively what we're all saying is
Mm.
that you have to be very clear why you're telling a story. And because the story has to work for you, people need to get it in the context of why you're telling it, right? A story could have many points you could make. You could tell the story of a monk and the two monks walking to the river, and they see this naked woman who wants to help them cross the river, who needs help to cross the river, and both the monks argue and saying this is not something that we can do. And the elder monk picks her up and crosses the river, puts her on the other side, and he goes off. And the younger monk is aghast that how could this guy violate so many rules? You're such a terrible guy. You are such a double-faced person. You have cheated. You're violated the monastic disciplines. And he goes on and on. And then at some point of time, after about a couple of miles, the older monk tells to him and says, "Look, I've dropped the girl there. You're the one who's still carrying her, right?" And now you tell the story at some point of time. You could tell about you could actually preface this by for a business leader to say that, look, in life you need to let go or of you need to know what to let go of it. And you can preface that, you can say that, or you could even preface the same story with another thing, right? For example, you could actually use the story for making a point about how it is important to do your duty and everything else will just follow, right? Or how uh, one needs to or you could use the story, or how you could actually use the story to talk about performing a task without any attachment to it, right? So without any attachment to the result. So uh,
Yeah.
so the point which I try to make is that as long as you know why you're telling the story, it's important. But if you just tell the story of two monks carrying the naked woman to the river, then you actually don't have the purpose. Then you don't know. The audience will just think it is just one of those unnecessary things in what is not what is a normal speech, and which is why also storytelling fails, right? Which is the why storytelling is a skill and an art, because it means that you need to know which stories to tell. It means that you need to know when do you want to tell that story. It means that you also need to have rehearsed that story. So you need to know the names, you need to know the context. So that's why that's a skill part of it. So in my conversations with leaders, this is what I tell them, that learn storytelling, but also learn, more importantly, what is the point that you want to make with the story, and that is when it all comes alive.
Quite interesting. What I'm thinking is that there are so many people who do such good work, but they're not able to articulate it. And that's why sometimes they are left behind in the race. And the people who can put their work out, talk a lot about what they're doing, whether they are able to do it or not with the same impact, but they're able to talk about it. They're able to put their story out there. So how do you want to address that question to those people who are not able to articulate it well? How can they work on this? What are some things that we can do, which can help us to put our story out there?
I think it all starts with the intent and awareness, isn't it? First of all, I mean, there are I've been one of those guys who's always looked at it and said, why should I go and tell about what I work? Isn't my
Mm.
work not good for me? Why can't my work speak for itself? And I think there's a lot of merit there, right? I think there's a lot of merit in the fact that that your work must speak for yourself at some point of time, and you should not be tom-tomming about it.
Mm.
That's one way of looking at it. But I give this analogy to a lot of my a lot of my sessions about, let's say you're going to this entire, let's say you're visiting your friend's house, And it's a colony that you don't know. It's like one of those old public sector colonies, or it's in an apartment complex. It's individual villas. You get into the complex, and your friend says that this is the address, this is where you have to go. But you're there, you will say that, okay, he's my friend, he will find my house, let him find it. By 7:30 p.m. I will switch off the light at the light on the outside. I will not have the porch. I will not have a drop. I will not have my address board. I will not even have my name. Let them come and find myself. This is such a beautiful house. Why can't he find it? He's my friend after all. He should find it. And what if you kind of switch off all the lights outside the house? You're sitting inside watching Netflix, and your friend is trying to search for your house in the evening at 8 p.m. in the night, right? You're not making it easy for him. So I keep talking about you telling a bit about yourself and letting your work shine as a bit like you putting a nameplate outside on your house and put the light on for the porch to people to help you to find you, right? That's all you're trying to do. You're not doing anything more than that. And I think that's your duty to talk about your work. It's as simple as that. And I think storytelling is just doing it a little more creatively so that maybe you just want to keep a little bit of engagement. So we're not talking about putting up a disco jing jang kind of a stuff with disco lights and laser lights and say, this is where Uday Kiran stays. No, that is really going out of the board. But just putting out a board and helping people to understand and sending out a Google map to help them find the direction and saying, this is where you reach, is something that all of us can do in our lives to help ourselves discover, right? Otherwise, you're just sitting inside your room and letting not anyone giving, you're not giving yourself a chance or someone else a chance. So that's the first part of it. And I think the second part of the question that you also asked is about uh, this entire thing about some people not being able to do something, but not doing well, but articulating it very well, and articulating very well, not and doing great work, but so both the things, right? Some people do the work very well, can't say. Some people say a lot of things but don't do. I think it evens out. I mean, you can fool some people sometime, you can fool, but you can't fool all the people all the time, right? So if you are one of those persons who can tell a good story and can't back it up with work, you will be found out. Yeah, I mean, there's a world, it's a much more connected place. Maybe it was not possible decade back when we were not so connected and when news didn't spread. But today, if I tell a story, you can go back. You and me are connected on LinkedIn to so many people. All it takes for Archana to do is to just connect with someone out there and say, hey, Uday is like this. Do you really think what it is, right? Or you can just go back to uh, so many other digital footprints or common connections. So I think the second guys are always going to falter sooner or later. You can't fool people. But I think the first guys, I have a lot of hope to build it because uh, I think increasingly the realization is coming in the corporate and leaders that at the end of the day, Archana, it's all about communication. So leadership, we talk about leadership in very, very big terms. And for me, the essence of all leadership is your ability to communicate. And whether it is change management, whether it is your decisiveness as a leader, whether it is your strategy, at the end of the day, as a leader, if you're not able to communicate in a way in which you can make people respond to what you want to do or what you want to get it done or what you want to drive to the goal, then you fail as a leader. So I keep going on a limb and saying that a leader need not be very great in strategy. A leader can still be someone who's not perhaps that competent. A leader may still be someone who's perhaps not as decisive as what most of the leaders could be. But if a leader is not a good communicator, then boy, he would not have become a leader, right? So at the core of all of leadership is all communication. And storytelling is a very powerful way in which you can make your communication better. There are other ways to make your communication better, but storytelling is one of those key components, right? Because that is the oldest and the most easiest way in which humans can connect with you.
Beautiful. So if I had to wrap up the storytelling bit here, and I ask you, what are the three things that we must do to be a good storyteller? What are the three things that you must recommend?
Oh, interesting that you always ask. The power of three is a very, very powerful thing in storytelling, as you would know, right? At least it's always good. So there are more than three things, but if I have to really look at it, I think specifically in the context of business storytelling, I think always know why are you telling a story. It's an extremely important thing. Know why are you telling the story. The second thing is that I think your personal stories from your own life and experiences are way more powerful than a story about an Elon Musk or a story about Mahatma Gandhi, because people want to know you, right? It is in a communication, people want to know you, and as many stories as possible. If you are able to use your own personal examples and stories, the power of it is just unimaginable and great. And the third one is that is one of those takeaways from all the my learning, is that I think, Archana, you'd realize that people love stories, but people don't love but people get extremely irritated if they know that you're telling a story, right? So I think the trick of business storytelling, or for that matter, any storytelling, is to get in and out of the story before people realize it's a story. So the worst thing that you can do is to say to people that, look, I'll tell you a story, wait.
Yeah. But that
So
also
avoid
gets
that.
you curious, right? I mean, that gets you curious. Oh, yeah, I'm here
No,
to
I think
see
more
the
than curious, I think in my experience, more than curious, I think it just kind of pisses people off. Acha, ek kahani batayega. And there's a
story.
good chance that people will just switch off and actually tell you to shut up as well. So it's almost as bad as saying, I'm going to tell you a joke, you have to laugh at it, right? I think storytelling fails because a lot of people come onto the podium and say, let me start with the story. I think people just don't want you to do that. Just get started by telling the story. So three things are there. Know why you're telling the story. Tell your own stories, which are more powerful than anything else. And third, never start a story by telling that I'm going to tell you a story.
So very interesting. Today only on LinkedIn, there was an article which my husband was reading out to me and said, what a powerful way to tell a story, in which there's this person who's narrated something on the packaging of toothpaste. So it seems like, there were cartons of toothpaste which were going, and there were some cartons which were going empty. And then they assigned this whole thing that how come the cartons are being packed empty, So to analyze that whole situation, I think they got on to a very big consulting. And then, of course, after spending worths of billions of dollars, they put like a weight machine that if there was less weight, and then it'll just, put it out there. And then what happened in some days was that, there was some kind of like a fan which was kept, and then the cartons were just being pushed away because of the speed of the fan. And this is like, that the cartons are being removed. How come? So then it was explained that, this new person who's come, he feels a little bit it's claustrophobic, whatever. And so does, it was like solved without whatever. Of course, he's being trolled, and there's a lot of discussion being around this whole LinkedIn post, etc. But the story intrigued me, and yeah, sometimes the solutions are so simple, we just don't have the power to look at that. So we spend billions of dollars, we try to strategize in a very different way because we think every problem is so complex. So, of course, I'm not narrating it verbatim, but I'm just giving an example that how a simple message came through so powerfully and made me think as well, as a person like, who was just reading an article, says, yeah, that made a difference. Yeah, actually, why don't we try to solve, in a different manner? So definitely, I mean, while he's telling a story, he's giving a case study, and, like he's explaining. I think it leaves a much larger impact as well to people to say, okay, how do I implement that in my life in whatever way I can? And I don't have to be a part of the big circle or a big organization to try to solve things. How do I bring it in my own personal life to do it? So I think stories can do so much to you. And it brings a lot of personal reflection. And that's my takeaway from, trying to do a storytelling kind of a format, because it somewhere relates to me and it makes me think to say, yeah, if that person could do it, think so differently, it's making me do something as well. So you're doing a brilliant job, I have to say, getting people to tell their stories. Yeah, with SecondAct platform, this is also the intention, that people come and share their stories. And with Uday Kiran's story today, I'm hoping that somebody's life will be touched and somebody will have a reflection to say, okay, if Uday Kiran could do it, I can do it too. So now I want to talk a lot about your, I think, thinking about Mentza. How did that thought come to you? What is the intention there again? Of course, it's coming from storytelling, but you said this is a 20-minute platform of people who can have a discussion on a relatable topic. So tell us a little bit about the inception of Mentza.
Thank you so much. And that was an exceptional one about the toothpaste. I remember I remember listening to it quite a while back, but just reflecting on it, just opened up so many things when you were saying it. So thank you so much. Right. So Menza, so a couple of my friends, about six of them, at various points of my life, way back in Wipro, Anurag, Vesh, Anand, uh, and some of these guys were actually handling this company called Final Mile, which is India's largest behavioral consulting firm. And once they kind of had a great that got acquired by Fractal Analytics, and they had a great exit out of it, and they were contemplating. And sometime in April 2020, the pandemic was setting in, and there was a lot of work around edtech. So these guys got together, and the whole idea was that can we kind of look at a space which can have people coming and talking in uh, having simple conversations about stuff that they're curious about, stuff that they want to learn, stuff that they want to learn from people whom they can interact with, which otherwise wouldn't have had access to. Social media was very difficult. LinkedIn can only do so much in terms of conversations. Twitter and all are fairly toxic and different. Facebook is a different space. So we're looking at, is there a space in which people can have good conversations like this, informal, spontaneous conversations, right? The whole idea of Menza as a word also came with the fact that it's a play on the word called mentors. So we were looking at, is there a place where mentors and people who want to learn and get mentored would be there? That was the original idea. And so it's 100% audio. It's an 100% audio platform. A bit like Clubhouse to start with. When Clubhouse was there, it's completely audio. So what were rooms on Clubhouse is what is called circles. I wasn't part of the original founding members, but but Anurag did reach out to me a few days after he started. So I got in, and I started building. At that point of time, I visualized myself as building an audio content, right? The whole idea is that speaking comes very naturally to all of us. If you want to speak about something, if you read a book, you speak about the book for a few minutes, you get a much more understanding of what you learned. And I think the difference that we made on Menza is that we said that, look, we value people's time. So I think the best thing is that 20 minutes is a great time period for someone to come and spend some time, talk about something, have a great conversation, and move on. Almost like a water cooler conversation. So even today, when I describe Menza, I don't, I'd say Menza is not like a classroom where someone's giving you a lecture, or it's not like one of those bars or Rocco's restaurants where there's a lot of drinking and fun and backslapping. It's a bit like the corridor that you walk on, where you have those, you just meet spontaneously people, then you stop by, then you have a great conversation on specific topic, you learn, and then you move on. And we said that, so the whole idea was to build a learning platform, but a learning informally, in conversations where people exchange views. We don't encourage monologues. So on Menza, there are speakers, there are listeners, and what is typically called a room in Clubhouse, for example, is called a circle in Menza, where you have a circle with a specific topic on any topic, right? So we've now got conversations on behavioral science, leadership, coaching, storytelling, art, media, culture, music, learning English, a whole sort of thing. So anything that you would want to learn or share, you could come and start off a conversation, and then you pick a specific time and date. Then people come, join in. There are speakers, there are listeners, they're interacting, and you are part of that conversation, right? It's a beautiful conversation for 25 minutes. It's amazing how much you can actually cover in 25 minutes. It's a very focused and insane engagement, right? So a typical LinkedIn post, someone would just connect for about a minute, an Instagram post for about half a minute. But on Menza, we've got an average engagement rate of about close to 17 to 18 minutes. So people are glued on to what you're listening, what you're speaking for about 18 to 20 minutes. Plus, they have a chance to hop in and speak to you, interact with you, add their views, share their perspectives, maybe even disagree with you, bring out a different thing. So the conversation, you could have started off thinking, let me talk about second act, but people will come and add so many more richer stories on second acts, what they think. So suddenly it's a rich, vibrant conversation, and people do go in, right? And over a period of time, we developed a lot of communities, a lot of organic communities evolved. And then from communities, we moved towards learning groups. Primarily, the way the platform is that we've organized ourselves into 4 learning groups.
Okay.
Spoken English, where people want to learn English. There is something on professional growth and learning, which is about career and leadership. And then we've got behavioral science and spirituality and wellness. So
Right.
that's where we are at the short and long run. So from a creator perspective, Mentza creates great opportunities for someone to come and create a podcast in 25 minutes because we could upload it on Spotify as soon as you record.
Oh,
From a learner's perspective, here's a chance for you to interact with a lot of people out there, people who want to really give back 20 minutes a week, and you get a chance to just interact. So I think it's a rich way in which we are trying to evolve the platform. So that's how it is.
perfect. So I think that brings me to thinking about why am I not there on the platform? And I will surely like to start a circle on second act
Love
with
to
people.
have you there.
I think
Second
that
act would just be the right thing, right? Yeah.
yes. I think second act brings in so many kinds of thoughts and meanings in my own life that I'm sure that there, if I open it out to people, to just pull in and tell me all about what they think of second act, why do we not get there? What stops us from experiencing our second acts? Why do we get stuck in our first acts? And so much more. I think, there is so much to talk about and come out of
So
our
much.
own barriers, which we create internally. And I think that's the thing that we all must do to just create so much self awareness that we are aware of everything that we go through, everything that we experience inside, so that we can, just say, okay, so far it was okay, but not okay anymore because I have my second act waiting. So, so it's so powerful that every day I just get up and say, okay, what's my second act going to be today?
I think the phrase itself has got a lot of meaning, even the moment you say that, right? Because for a person who's actually been, who's actually going through the phase, especially when you've gone through a good 15 to 20 years of your career, that's the kind of time that you're actually wondering and starting to think that what next, right? And I think it inevitably comes to everyone. It's almost like the inflection point of every career journey. And if it doesn't come, I'll be very surprised that if it does not come, right? So whether you're successful, whether you're not successful, everyone is always looking at what is going to happen next. So yeah, and I think the whole aspect of second act is, in fact, one of the questions that I always like to ask when I'm in my coaching sessions, especially in the personal branding sessions and stuff like that, is that so I would ask Archana, what if you didn't have a choice to not use anything of what is there on LinkedIn right now as an introduction for yourself? What if you had everything removed from you? And what if you were to go into a place where from tomorrow you had to kind of introduce yourself completely without whatever you have right now? How would you do that?
That's an
Right.
interesting
And that kind of stuff can happen, right? Stuff like that can happen because people lose jobs overnight. People kind of completely get off that the stuff is taken away or life changes in dramatic ways. And it's a difficult thing, right? Because a whole lot of my own career, Archana, for me, I've always been, and like all of us, right? I've always identified myself with my company, with my role, with my designation, and it's damn good. That's the way it has to be because that gives you identity, that gives you credibility. But at some point of time, we realize that all of us are expendable. All of us have different things, and there is always going to be that moment where things change. And maybe you will have to figure out what is Uday Kiran or what is Archana becoming in the process. And I think second act is beautiful and dramatic and intense in that sense because more often than not, it it is trying to bring out an element of your personality, of your identity, which has perhaps been hidden to the world, which you really wanted to do in the first place, right? Now, very few people are fortunate to actually do what they really want in their life, also as part of the job. But having said that, right, when you do it for about 2 decades or so, there is angst, there is boredom, there is routine which comes in, and there is something that you want to definitely express. So I see second act as one of those. I don't want to dramatize it like a storyteller and say the rising of the phoenix, but it's almost a journey of discovery of your own self this time, right?
Yes.
Where you really want to have a lot more meaning in your life, and you
Yes.
start picking. And I also think it kind of happens also because your personal life journey also happens. Perhaps it's also a time when you've gone through your initial stages, you've gone through your dating phase, you've married, you've done the stuff, you've perhaps have kids, kids are also slightly elder. You don't have to run after their diapers. So all of it is done. A lot of things in life which you really wanted to run after are pretty much automated. There is a whole element of your mental bandwidth which is suddenly freed and which is allowing you to think about, hey, what is next? So I think even in your personal journey, I think you come to a phase where all of it coalesces. Mostly why people call it a midlife crisis, but I'm not saying it doesn't. It only happens for 40. For some people, it could happen early. For some people, it could happen just around the time. For some people, it doesn't have to happen. So you don't have to have a second act because your first act itself is so awesome. So and that's magic, right? So that's the reason I like the word second act. It's a good way to kind of look at what you want to do.
I think I agree and I disagree a little bit here, because second act is not about that you have everything inside, in the first act itself. Just like, life, human beings are evolving every minute. And it's never a moment that you say, okay, now I've had it all, बस मिल गया मुझे सब कुछ, इसके आगे तो मुझे जाना ही नहीं है. And like you said, second act वो discovery है, वो एक चीज है जिसमें आप अपने आप को जान पाते हो. So it's not about your title anymore. It's not about the designation you hold. It's about the values you hold. It's about the strengths you have. It's about the abilities that you never experienced before. So I can only tell you, in the corporate world or in all my work life for 26 years, मैंने बहुत कुछ किया and बहुत कुछ पाया and बहुत experience किया अपने आप को, but not the way I have experienced myself in 2.5 years. I was not that person who could write content. I do now. I could never think that I'm going to make reels ever in my life and like showcase myself in a way I can do right now. I mean, I speak on topics which are so close to me, which I never thought I had an opinion on as well. I was wanting to be such a neutral person, such a good girl all the time, to say, this is also okay, that's also okay, but it wasn't okay. So, like also voicing, because now, because of me, I feel that I'm touching so many more people. I'm becoming so much more relatable. So I'm experiencing a different person altogether because I've allowed myself to be. So that is the journey of my second act. So I think like humans, like, and this phrase is very, very close to me, saying that human beings are work in progress, and so is, second act. So yes, of course.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, completely agree with you. And I think it's a whole exciting journey of discovery about your own self, because to just add into some of the things, I think, Archana, what also happens, and this has happened in my case, in what has largely been my second act journey, I didn't need validation. I didn't need to kind of be appreciated by people.
Yeah.
And I want to really do what, and I think we don't really understand what you really want to do for a long time.
A long time.
And I think second act also is about perhaps not, I don't think you really know what to do, but I think second act is a point where you definitely know what you don't want to do.
Oh yeah, that's a great point.
So I think that is perhaps so I think the clutter is a lot more off. And I think that always helps, right? You're still in a journey. It's not as if second acts are perfect, but at least you have that mental, that the mental attitude and the mental energy that, hey, you're pursuing something that you want to make a difference in. And
Yeah,
that's
and
an energy.
it's a constant process. So it's not that like it stops here. At least you're able to identify at every point to say, okay, I need to change this and I need to change that. And this I won't do. And I think that is something that you hit bang on to say, this is not something that I will do anymore. So I think that's a very strong reflection when you're so decisive, because most of our life we are not decisive, to be honest, especially on our personal development and personal growth. We don't know how to put a boundary to it. We don't know what value am I going to give out and what value it is that my time will bring, or what is the thing that I want to spend on and I don't want to spend on. So I think there is so much going on when you start your journey of self-awareness. I think it's such a beautiful, constant growth to success, as I would say. And of course, success has many definitions. But I think success is about understanding what this one life is going to be all about. When I have understood that I have one life, and if this is the only chance to do something, what is that going to be? And then, of course, it unfolds in many, many ways. So
So
thanks for
beautiful.
making a great discussion here on Second Act. I'm so excited all the time to talk about
Well,
it.
it's been a pleasure. It's been a pleasure, and I think I just feel that this conversation could go longer, and so much more, right? Because I think the other element that I just want to add, if we have just a minute more, is that uh, I think as much as we think second acts are normal or they happen every time, I think one also has to be fortunate enough to have an ecosystem around you who
Yeah,
can actually help you to prepare for that second act. It's
so
not so it's not intuitive, it's not just a natural thing. It's not like one day you come out of the one day you go into the makeup room and say, okay, I'm ready, getting ready for a second act. I think it's a mental evolution. You have
yes.
to prepare for it. You have to address the elephants in the room, financials, whether it is
Yes.
career, whether it is your skills, competency,
Yeah.
family,
Yeah.
all of these things have to be on board.
Yeah.
There are gives and takes everywhere. So it is, so I think it is essentially another way to look at Archana is that one is about knowing at least to some extent what you don't want to do. And the second thing is to having, confronting that decision movement and taking those calls, right? Uh, I think everyone by about 10-15 years knows, mere ko ye karna hai. But I think a lot of us generally postpone the decisions because we think that there is going to be a lot more clarity after 5 years. I will get this bank balance and then do it. Uh,
Mm.
in my in my realization, realize that while I respect people who have those views and want to get it right, I've been on that journey and I realized that look, it's really not going to make a difference, right? I don't think at some point of time. So second act, the other thing I want to tell people is, in my reflection, is second acts are all about getting it done rather than getting it right. So uh, you will not you will not always have the answers. Believe me, it's not easy to do that. But I think your mindset will be such that you will be far more willing to take a risk and go into that, right? Whatever it is. And I'm not talking about risk only about the money. It also is risk of attention, risk of time, risk of relationships, a lot of those things. So yeah, one has to be
Oh.
prepared for all of those things. So you have to ideally glide into it rather than just jump into it. That's the way I look at it.
Yes, it's opening up another thought with me that we are speaking so much in depth about it today. And if possible, after this podcast, if you can just pen down your thoughts on second act, what came out of this conversation, that'll also, it just enhances my own possibility to help people to have a perspective. Sometimes I'm talking about second act through my own experiences, what changes I could. But if people around also bring in their own thoughts, their own intentions, their own understanding of it, who knows what happens today?
Oh, wonderful. I'd love to do that.
Great.
Definitely.
So, of course, the most pertinent question of this podcast is what's your second act? And whatever it might be coming to you, what's your second act?
Well, my second act right now is a bunch of things that I did talk about. Like you mentioned earlier, I didn't think my life would be revolving so much around uh, telling stories and maybe getting even paid for it, right? In a way in which enhancing people's skills and expressing themselves. So for me, if I have to really break it down into different parts, there are two lives that I have in terms of one as a trainer and a person as a consulting person who works with people on telling the stories. And when I say telling the stories, how do you help leaders and organizations to choose their communication strategy towards storytelling? How can they articulate their points well? How can they work? How can the sales teams, functional teams are able to use this aspect of storytelling to influence, engage, and inspire people around them? I also do a fair amount of work in data storytelling. So, well, how do you kind of make numbers come alive? How do you make people work? A big part of my life as in sales and marketing always used to be, used to look at an Excel sheet, and I used to always wonder, इसका pie chart बनाना है या bar chart बनाना है? क्या बनाना है? How do I make it? So
Hmm.
I think some of those things are how to really construct narratives around presentations. So that's the entire part, and I think there's a whole bit of skill there, and no amount of chat GPT and stuff can replace the human element of connect and emotion, right? At the way it is. That's one part of it. On Menza, it's a completely different journey. It's I think the Menza journey feeds on to what I do. On Menza, like we were talking about the other day, I see myself, my role is, apart from being a storyteller on the platform and managing the platform, I see myself in the process of wanting to give back whatever I have. Archana, one of the things that all of us tend to think is that मैं क्या दे सकता हूँ? What can I be of use to someone? मेरा तो experience ऐसे ही है, मेरा भी 15 साल है. I'm not an influencer, but I think we have no idea how much a conversation that someone on the other side will benefit with when you share your own experiences. Right. So in Mentza, what we try and facilitate this entire space of making people who can give, to give them a safe space where they can come and give, right? Give 20 minutes of your time, have conversations with people, and just see how much it makes a difference to them as much as makes a difference to you, right? This whole facilitation of making people give, people like you, people like me, people who have had a bit more privilege of having a journey, and whatever do, whether it is about sales or marketing or functionality, about leadership, about corporate HR, or how to make a resume, how to speak in English, right? So much that there can be shared, and it's a two-way benefit, right? One is uh, and it's a deeper philosophy that we imbibe, that it is in giving that you really gain a lot more than in receiving. You would never perhaps have that immense joy when you receive a birthday gift than when a birthday gift that you give to someone else is enjoyed by the other person. And the same thing translates to sharing knowledge as well. And Menza, the spirit is to come build communities of learning, share, grow together. And boy, there's a whole world of opportunity out there. And I think we are trying to build that space, and that's a journey that we are on. That's a journey of second act that I am on, really.
Very nice.
Everything else operational, but I think that's the larger theme.
Yeah, very nicely put, and thank you for sharing that. And yeah, that gives a whole lot of perspective about what you're doing and what you're trying to do with Menza and your values that you hold and what you really believe in, because that's important to bring into the second act of our life, because it should not be very brand based or the organization that we are working on based. It should be what we want to give back and also to enhance our life capability. So thank you for sharing that. Of course, this question again comes to me because you've had a very robust corporate life, now moved to entrepreneurship. So tell me about that journey. What are the, let's say, 3 learnings that came out of being an entrepreneur versus a corporate person?
Well, I think I'm not one of those guys who look back and say, "Oh my God, I've wasted a lot of time." I think I've gained every moment of my love in my corporate journey, right? Whether it is my first job in Everready, where I didn't understand the first few days as to why I was sitting in a management school and now I'm carrying a bag of torches and batteries and walking in the deepest parts of West Bengal selling, and humbling to stand in front of a wholesaler who couldn't speak English but had the power to, because if he didn't buy, I would not do my targets. The whole process of learning, interacting, and connecting with people at different levels, understanding that was the biggest learning in the corporate life, right? The communication, what it means, you learn to apply. And I think the other big learning that in my corporate career has been about to just work with people. And so much of what we think is our own thing is never what you do. You're just not an island, right? Whatever you do is a result of so many people contributing together for your task. And one of the and that's not a learning that comes very early, but it comes over a period of time, that you're not just the only person doing this. And then when you start looking at it, teamwork, people management, all of it completely takes a different dimension. And the third thing, which I have been fortunate enough, I wish I would have done it a lot more, is that I think I kept my initial curiosity alive. For some reason, I've been fortunate to have a bunch of friends and folks and books who kept challenging me. And at no point of time I got swept off in this belief that work is what I have 24/7. I kept my mind open for a whole lot of the things. I think I continue to read. I continue to connect with friends from different places. My friends list would not be more than 50% of my corporate friends. I met varied people. So I think that when I connect back the dots today, I think a lot of that kept me sane, didn't let me get into this entire ivory tower of knowing not. So I think the diversity of experiences is something that one needs to always cultivate. That's from the corporate journey. Entrepreneurial journey is so much about just getting started, right? I think for me, the biggest learning is all about, Archana, if I have to distill it down, getting it done is way, way more important than getting it right, right? And you know that yourself. If you have to start a podcast, I'm sure there must have been months where you would have sat through and said, you want to have this perfect podcast, and you think, and then one fine day when you actually do it, uh, you realize after it's done it, oh, iske liye main itna headache, I was taking a headache. So I think entrepreneurship is about, if you're able to get started on something and get going and have a high action bias, you will figure out a way, right? You will figure out a way to listen and learn, and you build it. Don't expect, especially in creative spaces like you, where you work in, and some of the spaces that I work in, we don't have all the answers. So I think entrepreneurship is all about, one, getting it done, because the more the ambiguity, the more it is important for you to start with some thread and start getting onto the journey. And then trust that the journey and your intentions and values which are there, if they're aligned, you will find a way out of it. That's the biggest learning that I have, right? So yeah, these are the 3 or 4 learnings that I've had.
No, very nice. Yeah, it actually sets me going. When I started my podcast journey, I don't know how it started. Honestly, I don't know how it started. My only intention was, what all can SecondAct do? And one was that I was putting workshops together for helping people to discover that. So then I said, probably my journey will be again my journey. And how can I bring in this platform to make it so big that, so many people have, and everybody has a story, like you said. So how can I bring in people's stories here to enhance somebody else's SecondAct? So yeah, I just took that first step, and there I had 100 people already on my podcast. We just wrapped up our 100th episode in Jan. This is the third series with 100 plus episodes coming. I don't know where this will go, but like, so much I have learned myself just because I took that step. I was very intentional in doing what I was doing. So I think, yes, entrepreneurship is all about taking that step. I might not know anything, or just about not knowing everything, but I at least had the intent to. And then people do fall in place, things do fall in place, resources do fall in place. I think, yeah, it's been incredible.
Tiago Forte takes in one of his classes, right? He talks about this beautiful question that he says that you should ask yourself, what is that one small step that you can take from where you are? If everything else that you didn't know, you don't know about it, but what is that one small step that you can take towards that journey? Take that step. And once you take that step, I can promise you that the next step will come. A lot of us don't take that one step, right? So, so what is that small step that you can take?
So true. So true. So yeah, I think we have a lot to talk about on the Mentza platform. I'm very excited now about it.
We'd love to have you. We'd love to host you there.
Yeah, so I think this is a good podcast about so many facets that we spoke about. We spoke about you as a person, you as a business person, you as a corporate person, you as a SecondAct person. And I think it unfolded a lot about Uday today. And as I said, do write about it, what came to you as a reflection. I have something called a rapid fire. It might not be like coffee with Karan, but something like,
I don't want it to be like coffee with Karan. I don't know if I'm competent to answer questions like that. Rapid
No, but
fire.
it's just to get you know a little bit more about you and to make it more interesting. So, okay, so if there is one thing Uday could change about himself, what would that be?
If I wish I had a little more. I wish I was a little more focused on my fitness and just go out and just do that walk or a run or a jog a little bit more. I think it might sound a lot more boring, but I think I know, boy, it's one of those things that I just don't get myself to do.
By the way,
I
it's
wish I
not
could.
boring, and I think most of us struggle with that. I see a lot at my own place. So yeah, we are all wanting to, wait.
That's something that I wish I can do a lot more on that. So that's what I think. I think the health part of it more. I've been blessed, but I think I could do a lot better.
we keep procrastinating on that. I don't know. I want to have a chat with people also about this topic. Why do we procrastinate? Yoga,
Yeah.
fitness, health, food, whatever. Yeah, okay, that's a good topic to have. Okay, second, you said you read a lot. So, what are 2 or 3 books that you really go back to whenever you have to think about something, or it's a good reflection to go to, or to think about what you learned from there? What are those few books that have made an impact in your life?
A whole big list, right? So some of my friends would know that I'll always talk about To Kill a Mockingbird, which is by Harper Lee, which is my North Star of a book. I love that book. It's a book that I picked up very early in my life. Thankfully, I didn't read it in a non-detailed, or I didn't have to write exams for it on like how a lot of US students would have to do that. I read it like a story, the way it should be read. Um, Atticus Finch is one of my favorite characters out there. Great father and gem scout, and the whole story of growing up in America, which was while with a lot of racial um, struggles, and how a father brings up his children, and the whole integrity of the whole story is a story that kind of makes me get goosebumps. There's so many dialogues there about courage, about standing up for yourself and what you believe in, and and how parents, how children just look up to the father. And there's a beautiful scene in that story where, after a very dispassionate speech in the hall, in the court, about defending the accused, Atticus Finch starts walking away from the floor, and all the people in the hall, in the court hall, stand up. And this girl, Gem Scout, who's the actually the narrator, Harper Lee uses it, is sitting down, and one of the black ladies out there, quickly hustles to her and says, "Scout, stand up. Your father is walking." So it's a it's a beautiful scene where the girl sees that her father is so great that he's actually being respected by everyone else for the sheer amount of integrity. And I think that's a great story. I love all the books by Bill Bryson. Storytelling is my favorite. So I have a huge love for science as well as mythology, both.
Sure.
So I keep going back to a lot of these. So I would recommend, at any day, at a dull moment, I'd love to go back to Bill Bryson, all his books, whether it is A Brief History of Everything, or The Body, or his walks in the Appalachian Trails, or any of those books, right? Bill Bryson is just master.
Wow. Wow.
I do a lot of mythology reading as well, from Norse to Hindu mythology. I do go back to a lot of those books. I do a lot of series on Bhagavat and also Mahabharat on Mentza. So yeah, so that's something which is fascinating. A very meaningful book, Man's Search for Freedom. That's another book that is always on our bedside. It's a book it's a book by Viktor Frankl. It's about the Nazi concentration camps, where he undergoes a
Yeah.
lot of struggle and comes out. And I think every line in this book is worth its weight in gold. And it's not a book I think you can finish ever, because every time you go back to that book at a point of time, I think it speaks to you in a different way. So I think that's some of the things. I'm a crazy trivia addict, so I too keep getting back to my graphic novels and comics and Tintins and Amar
Nice.
Chitrikada. So yeah, so books can get me completely sorted. Yeah, so so there's a vast range out there, but I think I just mentioned a few.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. And I totally agree that there are some books wherever that pick them up at whatever point in life that you are in, they will tell you something about, that very moment. And it's
True.
so beautiful, and it's so, sometimes you feel, oh my God, but this made, me, it just made me think again. Like, I did not understand it fully that time. Maybe now it's making more sense to me, or something else. So yeah,
Thank you.
that's true. That is so true. So glad you shared that. Okay, so my next question is that what is that one fun thing that you do for yourself?
One fun thing.
Hmm.
Oh, uh, fair amount of things. So I'm assuming that what all I do right now is not fun. So you want something else apart from that?
No, this could be fun as well. What do you want to say?
For me, I'm slightly more into. I love watching sports as much as I'm not a great sports player and all, but for me, watching sports is a good thing. And I really, really, one of the fun things that I used to do and I want to do very often it's a vague thing, right? So I typically switch off the TV when the cricket game is on, and one of my fascinating uh, guilty thrills, cheap pleasures, was to become the commentator and commentate on the game as if I was a Harsha Bhogle or
Wow.
commentators, and just read and record it, and then play it back and just see. So that's one of those vague fun things. So yeah, so that cricket, I love the game, and I watch it like anyone else in the country. But yeah, I think I do have a whole host of statistics and books and journals update a lot of that stuff. That's something that I do. I love travel a lot. I do go. We just at times when we just get off into long journeys with the family into offbeat places. I've got two daughters, two teenage daughters. It's a great time to be a dad for two teenage daughters. So it's good to kind of listen to them. Their perspective of the world is completely different from what I have. So they help me understand Korea, BTS, and a whole lot of stuff. So it's just nice to discover how the world is looking at it, how they look at the world from their world. So I love conversations with a lot of them and their friends. So that's one of those things that I do. Yeah, some of these things. And I love music. I play a lot of drums. So I do jamming with them. And yeah, so music is another area where we do house is full of music. My wife is a Carnatic music singer. She plays the veena. The girls are
Yeah.
also into music. I play drums. So that's another thing that we keep doing
Wow.
very quite often.
Wow, that's exciting. So the family who just does music together stays together comes to me. That's very exciting. All right, so that's a great wrap up. And just last question, if you had to leave the viewers or the listeners throughout this podcast with one thing, what would they say today?
I, yeah, I think I think it's important to kind of enjoy your journeys wherever you are and whatever you're doing, right? I think um, I know it's a very mundane thing to say, but I think it's important to understand what is it that is really making you happy. And as much as what is making you happy, you also understand that uh, this entire thing about passion being passion, you should follow your passions, and all of it is very, very, very highly overrated. So for me, it's important that uh, you figure out a way to, because every good thing that you really like, understand that there is a lot of romance about your passions, but the moment it becomes a process and it has to become routinized, then the whole romance goes off. But the reality is that in whatever little I've seen of great people, um, every passion, every hobby, everything that you really like to do is first the whole journeys to start, and then it is a set of what is largely called mundane tasks repeated again and again and again and again to keep sharpening yourself, right? So what I want people to take back is that follow your passion, but be prepared that if that passion has to serve you in terms of giving you value, acclaim, recognition, wealth, or whatever you have, the second act is all about not just the romantic journey, but it's also a lot of process, hard work, and routine tasks, right? Because that's where the magic happens. Uh, there's a beautiful line that I want to leave. People generally think creativity, there is something about consistency and familiarity, consistency and creativity, right? Um, and the ratio of consistency and novelty or creativity is almost at a level of 90s to 10 or 80s to 20. A lot of times in second act you will understand the value of showing up, and just showing up and being consistent, like how you did 100 podcasts, right? And you realize when you go back to listen to your first podcast, and then the podcast now would have been dramatically different. Something changed. You can't articulate what has changed, but I think it would have not happened if you had not done those things, right? So I
Yeah.
think I put a lot more immense amount of aspect about consistency and getting it done, and I think that is where the real magic is. It's not the big idea. I think everyone has ideas, but I think the people who are able to consistently do it, learn, and come back and reflect on it are the ones who really kind of move forward. That's what.
You're so right. Yes. I think that's what I think most entrepreneurs, when I ask them, what is that one thing that they have experienced as an entrepreneur is that don't give up, just stay, at the path that you have chosen to, and be consistent. And of course, some people have given me the mantra that if you have crossed 900 nights, sleepless nights, that means that you're ready for the journey. So I'm just waiting for those 900 nights to happen as well.
I think sleep is very important. I would not sacrifice sleep at all.
Yeah, that's true. That yoga and meditation can help. I have to sleep like a little baby, because thanks to my meditation and yoga, that really helps me. So thanks, Uday. What a nice morning to start with your podcast. And I'm hoping to meet you soon when in Delhi. So lovely to have your thoughts on everything that you're doing, your thoughts on Second Act. It was very good discussion on Second Act, in fact. So thanks you really for sharing whatever you could. And looking forward to maybe next series and, knowing more about in some time again, because we need to reinvent, right? Who knows?
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you so much, Archana. First of all, thank you so much for starting this platform of Second Act. Really appreciate it. I think you're doing a phenomenal work in connecting with people, and this aggregated learnings is going to make a huge difference. Secondly, to consider to just have me on this podcast and to talk to you about it, and let me just be talking about what I want to do. So hopefully it would be engaging enough and insightful enough for all the people who would listen. And thanks so much for this. All the best, and wish you all the best, and hope to see you for many more conversations on Mentza as well.
Yeah. Yes, looking forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you so much.